Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Kerbal Space Program Live. This episode is going to be cut a bit short because unfortunately during our live stream we had a few technical difficulties, which means that the sound didn't actually get recorded quite the way that I am used to. So I've decided to re-record this. What we did in this episode, first of all we showed off the space station that's now operational as a result of our off-screen episode that we did, episode 10A. But our plan for this episode was to bring another escape pod up to this space station just so that we could give it a bit of a flight test, just to make sure that these escape pods were actually fit for purpose. Now, we used exactly the same rocket as we had used for the other escape pods, and this time we brought the pod up, and rather than actually docking it with the station, we parked it next to the station so that we could just burn it straight back into the atmosphere just to make sure it got back. So what you're going to see in this video is our launch and our rendezvous with the space station, and then returning our escape pod back to Kerbin. So here we are. This is the rocket on the launch pad, ready to take Jebediah Kerman up in an escape pod to our space station. And as usual, we had to accelerate time to bring our space station round to a point where our launch would be timed well enough for a decent rendezvous. So that's what we're doing here. We zip the space station round, stop it in roughly the right position, and then we head back to the launch pad and we do our countdown. Jebediah Kerman is ready. SAS is on. Throttle is up. And it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we are in the air. Now I'll skip through the stages of the launch because you've all seen that before, and as this is a copy of the previous rocket, you've certainly seen this procedure before. So here we are, we've dumped off all the main fuel tanks and we are raising our apoapsis so that we can meet up with our space station. Now our space station is running on a very circular orbit, so it's actually quite easy to get a rendezvous with the station. On this occasion the rendezvous is slightly trickier. I think for some reason the angle of our ascent was slightly different to previous launches, so when we actually get the apoapsis to the right altitude, the angle of our orbit is actually slightly off. And you will also notice that the rendezvous point with the space station actually comes up a bit further round the orbit than I am normally used to. So I think maybe we had a slightly shallower launch and with a slight north or south angle on this occasion. So you'll see here we're just starting to see the rendezvous markers, and the second marker doesn't appear until quite far round. So we have to do a couple of different manoeuvres to get our rendezvous into the right place. Here we are starting the burn on our manoeuvre, and this is actually the manoeuvre to get the final rendezvous with our space station. And as we jump out to the map, you can see that our rendezvous is planned for almost a complete orbit around. I actually mistimed the burn as well, which didn't help. So you will see that basically what I do is I line it up, make sure it's in the right place, and then just have to watch the intersect markers to see where we are going to get our rendezvous. And here we go, this is us on the last part of that procedure, slowing down the boosters just so that we've got the control and I think we get it down to about 1.5 kilometers away from the space station. A little bit further than we're used to, but it is a rendezvous nonetheless. And this is basically just a test flight, so we're really not too worried about being really close. You'll notice that I do actually get quite close in the end anyway. What I'm doing here is I'm just transferring some of the fuel, because the way the system works is it burns the furthest away fuel tank from the engine first, which has actually used up the fuel in the escape pod. So to correct that, I transfer the fuel back from the main fuel tank back into the escape pod, and then you'll see that I disable the fuel crossfeed so that that fuel now cannot be used by that engine for any future burns, just to guarantee that we will have a full fuel tank in the escape pod, so that this is a relatively accurate test. So all that's left to do now is to take the escape pod round to the space station, which we do of course by speeding up time. Here we go, around the planet. We overtake the space station, I believe, and then have to slow down to intersect with it. We've still got a 1.7 kilometer intersect planned. This is me just checking what all our distances are, making sure that we're still pointing in the right direction, seeing how fast we're travelling in comparison to the space station. Any of you that have been watching the other videos like this will be familiar with this process. And we get everything lined up, and we start to think about how we're going to meet with the space station. There is the space station over there, nearly 35 kilometers away, so we've got a bit of work to do to get us close, but I've cut all that out, and here we are 10 meters away. It was relatively straightforward getting closer to the space station, but here we are 10 meters away, and I've got a stationary relative to the space station. Now ordinarily what I would do at this stage is detach the fuel tank and dock with the station so that we had the escape pod, but we're assuming that because this is a test flight, we're actually heading home. So I deactivate the main booster, activate the boosters on the escape pod so that we can then line ourselves up for a retrograde burn and use the boosters fuel, the escape pod's fuel, and the boosters on the escape pod to take us back into the atmosphere. So here we are, I'm lining up for our retrograde burn. Now ordinarily what you would do is you would wait until you were at the apoapsis of your orbit before you actually start your burn. But we wanted to simulate an emergency situation, some debris has hit the space station or something along those lines, and everyone has to bail out quickly, jump in the escape pods and get away. So in this test we don't actually do that. As you can see here, we're just kind of in the middle of our orbit and we start burning, but it really doesn't make too much difference. In fact, it's a good way to test because it's the least fuel efficient way to return from orbit, the way that we've done it. We're aiming for roughly 40,000 meters on our periapsis, and you'll see we stop right around 40,000 meters, and that allows us to have a nice gentle re-entry. Once I've adjusted the periapsis, you see that I do now dump the fuel tank, so that this is realistic. That fuel tank will now re-enter into the atmosphere and obviously be destroyed on re-entry. And then we are ready to speed up time and get us closer into the planet, where we will detach the next stage, which it will be the boosters and the fuel tanks. on the escape pod. So we speed up time and we head back to Kerbin. And here we are just inside the atmosphere, heading back towards Kerbin, and there we release off the fuel tanks and the engines from the escape pod, leaving just the capsule with our parachute. We're entering into the atmosphere here. We've just gone under 30,000 meters, and only very, very slight atmospheric effects from our re-entry here. The angle and the speed that we've re-entered is actually very mild, so we have only very mild re-entry effects. There goes the parachute, so that slows us down even more, and we have a nice safe re-entry into the atmosphere. While I'm here, I decide, well, maybe we can pick up some science points. So we do a few things like crew reports and the like. We actually take an EVA report when we're down on the ground, and we do pick up a few science points on the way because we're over a different biome to the ones where we've taken these reports before. So that's all very handy. We can see we're going for a water landing, which is fine, and here we are. Here's that crew report. Not a lot of science points because it's a crew report from within Kerbin atmosphere, but every point counts, and it is an experiment that clearly we hadn't done yet. So here we are heading down, and we speed up time very slightly just to get us nearer to the ground. And then we cut that just above 500 meters, ready for the chute deployment, so that we can make a nice soft landing without ripping off our parachute. There we go, slowing down the time warp. Parachute pops, and we speed it up again to take us into the sea. And you'll see what we do now that we're in the water. We've had the problem before where the crew hatch always seems to spin round so that you can't get your Kerbal back in. So with the SAS, I actually stand the capsule on its end, which will be held in place by the reaction wheels within the capsule, so that we can do an EVA. We get an EVA report, which gets us some points, and we even take a water sample, which gets us a few more points, and then we can easily just grab back onto the pod and jump back in, ready for us to recover the vessel. And you will see the science points that we gather just in that little process pushes us now to over 100 science points, which means that we can unlock something new in our research centre. But we don't do that just yet. We're going to save that for another episode, and we can decide together what we are going to unlock ready for our next flight. So that's the basic summary of the live stream from Friday night. Unfortunately, it was not as long or as full a live stream as we would have hoped, but who knows, maybe this will make for a better video for you guys on YouTube. A nice little summary for you. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know what you think of this video, if you like the way this is going, and look out for a new series that we are starting with a new save game of Kerbal, with some of the mods from the community to make the game a little bit more interesting. But until then, see you later.